Hey guys, tonight, we're drifting to a place where everything is soaked, broken, and too quiet. A place where the ocean has taken what it wanted and left you with salt-crusted clothes, aching limbs, and the endless sound of waves that brought you here. Like and subscribe only if you enjoy this kind of thing. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is. I always love seeing where this story finds you in the quiet hours. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft hum, and let's drift back in time. The sand beneath your cheek is coarse and cold. You feel each grain pressing into your skin as consciousness seeps back slowly, like water filling a cracked vessel. Your eyes open to gray light filtering through heavy clouds, and for a moment you cannot remember where the ship ends and the shore begins. Your clothes cling to your body with the weight of seawater, every thread heavy and cold against your skin. The wool of your doublet has shrunk tight across your chest, and your linen shirt underneath feels like a second skin made of brine and exhaustion. You try to lift your head, and salt crystals crack at the corners of your eyes, tiny sharp pinpricks that remind you of tears you cannot remember shedding. The taste in your mouth is copper and ocean. Your tongue feels thick and swollen, coated with sand that grinds between your teeth when you try to swallow. Each breath brings the smell of seaweed and something else, something wooden and broken that speaks of splinters and rope and canvas torn beyond repair. You roll onto your side slowly, every muscle in your body protesting the movement. Your ribs ache with each breath, and there is a deep soreness in your left shoulder that pulses in time with the waves that continue to wash against the shore just feet from where you lie. The sound is constant, rhythmic, almost hypnotic in its endless repetition. Around you, the beach stretches in both directions, scattered with dark shapes that could be driftwood or debris or other things you do not yet want to name. The sand is marked with long lines where the tide has pulled objects up the beach and left them stranded, like signatures written in a language you are only beginning to understand. You push yourself up onto your hands and knees, and immediately your head spins with the effort. Salt water drips from your hair onto the sand below, each drop absorbed instantly by the hungry beach. Your hands sink slightly into the wet sand, and you can feel tiny shells and fragments of something that might once have been part of a barrel pressing into your palms. The wind cuts through your wet clothes with a sharpness that makes you shiver uncontrollably. It carries with it the sound of gulls calling somewhere in the distance, their cries thin and lonely against the vast gray sky. You look up and see them circling high above, white specks against the clouds, and you wonder if they see you as just another piece of debris washed up by the tide. Your legs shake as you try to stand, and you have to grip your knees to keep from falling back down. The world tilts slightly, and you close your eyes until the sensation passes. When you open them again, you see your first clear view of what remains. Pieces of the ship are scattered along the waterline like broken teeth. A section of the hull, still painted with traces of the blue and white that once marked it as belonging to the Virginia Company, lies half buried in sand 20 paces to your left. Beyond that, a tangle of rigging rope waves gently in the shallow water, moved by each incoming wave like the arms of some sea creature trying to swim back to deeper water. You take your first step, and your foot sinks slightly into the soft sand. Your boots squelch with each movement, water seeping out between the leather and the sole with every step. The sound is oddly comforting, a rhythm to accompany your slow progress along the beach. As you walk, you scan the shoreline for signs of others. Your eyes move slowly from each dark shape to the next, hoping to see movement, to hear a voice calling out across the sand. But there is only the wind and the waves and the occasional cry of the gulls overhead. Near what appears to be part of the ship's mast, you find a length of canvas tangled around a piece of broken wood. The fabric is heavy with water and sand, but when you pull it free and shake it out, you can see that most of it is still intact. You fold it carefully and tuck it under your arm, already thinking of the shelter it might provide when the sun sets and the wind grows colder. Your throat burns with thirst, and you realize that despite being surrounded by water, every drop of it is salt and useless to you. You run your tongue over your cracked lips and taste more salt, more of the ocean that brought you here and now holds you prisoner on its edge. The search for fresh water becomes your first real task. You turn away from the shore and begin walking inland, your waterlogged boots leaving deep prints in the sand that fills in slightly with each step. The beach gives way to scattered dunes covered with tough grass that bends and straightens in the wind like thousands of tiny hands waving. Behind the dunes, you find the beginning of what might be a forest. Stunted trees grow close together, their branches twisted by years of salt wind into shapes that look almost human in the gray light. Spanish moss hangs from some of the branches like torn cloth, swaying gently and adding to the sense that everything here moves with the rhythm of the sea. You push through the first line of trees, and immediately the sound of the waves becomes muffled, replaced by the whisper of wind through leaves and the occasional crack of a branch settling under its own weight. The ground here is softer, covered with fallen leaves that have turned brown and brittle. Each step makes a small rustling sound that seems loud in the relative quiet of the forest. It takes you nearly an hour of walking before you hear it, the sound of water moving over rocks. You follow the sound deeper into the trees, your heart beating faster with hope and the effort of walking. Your legs feel weak and unsteady, and several times you have to stop and lean against a tree trunk while you catch your breath. The stream, when you finally find it, is barely more than a trickle running between moss-covered stones. But the water is clear and cold, and when you cup your hands and bring it to your lips, it tastes like salvation. You drink slowly at first, letting the fresh water wash the salt from your mouth and throat, then more greedily as your body remembers what it means to be truly thirsty. You splash water on your face and feel the salt crystals dissolve and run down your cheeks. The cold makes your skin tingle, and for the first time since waking on the beach, you feel something approaching alertness. You fill your stomach with water until it aches with fullness, knowing that you may not find this place easily again. The walk back to the beach takes longer than the walk inland. Your legs are unsteady from exhaustion and hunger, and the canvas under your arm seems to grow heavier with each step. By the time you can hear the waves again, the light has begun to change, taking on the golden quality that speaks of afternoon moving toward evening. You spend the remaining daylight hours gathering what you can from the wreckage scattered along the shore. A piece of rope here, thick and still strong despite its soaking. A wooden cask there, cracked but possibly repairable. Each item you collect feels like a small victory against the vastness of your situation. As the sun begins to sink toward the horizon, you use the canvas and some pieces of driftwood to create a simple shelter in the lee of a large piece of the ship's hull. The work is slow and clumsy, your hands still numb from cold and your movements hampered by exhaustion. But gradually, you create a space that might keep out some of the wind when night falls. You gather armfuls of the dry grass from the dunes to make a bed inside your makeshift shelter. Each handful crackles as you spread it on the sand, and despite its roughness, it promises some cushion between your aching body and the hard ground. The fire takes longer to start than you expected. Your hands shake as you try to work the flint and steel you found in your coat pocket, miraculously dry despite everything else being soaked. The first sparks fall onto damp tinder and die immediately. Then more sparks and more failure, until your hands are cramped and your patience is worn thin. But finally, a spark catches in a small nest of dry grass, and you blow gently until a tiny flame appears. You feed it carefully with more grass, then small twigs, then larger pieces of driftwood until you have a fire that throws dancing shadows on the canvas walls of your shelter. The warmth feels like a miracle against your cold skin. You hold your hands close to the flames until the heat becomes almost painful, then pull them back and watch the firelight play across your palms. Steam begins to rise from your wet clothes, carrying with it the smell of salt and seaweed and something deeper, earthier, that might be your own body remembering what it means to be warm. You strip off your outer clothes and hang them on pieces of driftwood near the fire, hoping they will dry at least partially before morning. Your shirt and breeches underneath are still damp, but they have absorbed some warmth from your body and feel almost comfortable against your skin. Dinner is 3 pieces of ship's biscuit that you found in your coat pocket, somehow still wrapped in oiled cloth and mostly dry. You eat them slowly, savoring each hard, tasteless bite and washing them down with water from a small container you improvised from a piece of broken pottery. The biscuits are full of weevils, but you eat them anyway, grateful for any food at all. As the fire burns lower, you add more driftwood and settle back against the canvas wall of your shelter. The sound of the waves has become a constant background now, as natural as breathing or the beating of your heart. You close your eyes and try to plan for tomorrow, but exhaustion pulls at the edges of your thoughts like an outgoing tide. Sleep comes in fits and starts, interrupted by the cold seeping through the canvas and the unfamiliar sounds of the night. But eventually, you find a position that is almost comfortable, curled on your side with the canvas pulled close around you, and you drift into the kind of sleep that comes to bodies pushed beyond their limits. You wake before dawn to the sound of rain pattering against the canvas above your head. The fire has burned down to glowing coals, and the air inside your shelter is cold and damp. Your clothes, which you had hoped would be dry by morning, are still heavy with moisture that the humid night air has refused to steal away. The rain continues as gray light filters through the canvas, a steady drumming that turns the world outside your shelter into a blur of water and mist. You poke your head out and see that the beach has changed overnight. The tide has come up higher than it was yesterday, erasing your footprints and rearranging the debris that marks your small territory. You pull on your damp clothes with movements that are slow and deliberate. The fabric feels cold and clammy against your skin, and you shiver as you fasten the buttons with fingers that are still stiff from sleep and cold. Your boots are sodden and uncomfortable, water squishing between your toes with each step as you venture out into the rain. The rain is warm, at least warmer than the clothes you wear, and it washes some of the salt from your hair and face as you stand outside your shelter and take stock of what the night has brought. Several new pieces of wreckage have washed up on the beach, including what looks like part of a sea chest and a coil of rope that might be useful. You spend the morning moving through the rain, collecting anything that might be of use. The sea chest is locked, but the wood is swollen from seawater and you are able to pry it open with a piece of broken iron. Inside, you find a few items that might once have belonged to one of your fellow passengers. A bone comb with several teeth missing, a small leather pouch containing a few coins, and a bundle of letters tied with ribbon, the ink now completely washed away by seawater. The letters feel fragile in your hands, the paper soft and beginning to fall apart. You cannot read what they once said, but you can see that they were carefully folded and saved, important enough to someone to be carried across an ocean. You set them aside gently, unwilling to disturb what remains of someone else's connection to a world that now feels impossibly far away. The rope is in better condition, thick and strong despite its soaking. You coil it carefully and carry it back to your shelter, already thinking of ways it might help you improve your situation. Perhaps you could use it to secure the canvas more tightly, or to create a clothesline where your garments might actually have a chance to dry. By midday, the rain has softened to a fine mist that clings to everything like breath on a cold morning. You venture back into the forest to refill your water container and to search for anything that might serve as food. The stream is running higher now, swollen with rainwater, and the sound it makes as it runs over the rocks is fuller, more musical than it was yesterday. You find several types of berries growing on bushes near the stream, but you are afraid to eat them without knowing whether they are safe. Instead, you dig with your hands around the roots of some plants, hoping to find something edible underground. The work is slow and muddy, and your fingernails break and tear as you scrape at the earth. Finally, you uncover several small tubers that look similar to ones you remember seeing in gardens back home. You wash them carefully in the stream and eat one raw, chewing slowly and waiting to see if your stomach will accept it. The taste is bitter and earthy, but it stays down, and after an hour with no ill effects, you eat the others. The afternoon is spent trying to improve your shelter. You use the new rope to tie the canvas more securely to the pieces of driftwood that form the frame, and you gather more grass and leaves to spread on the floor. The work is methodical and soothing, each small improvement making the space feel slightly more like a place where a human being might survive rather than simply endure. You attempt to dig a small trench around the outside of the shelter to channel rainwater away from where you sleep. The sand is heavy and keeps collapsing back into the trench as you work, but eventually you create something that might keep the worst of the water from pooling under your canvas walls. As evening approaches, you rebuild the fire using driftwood that you have been saving in the driest part of your shelter. The wood is still damp and smokes heavily at first, but eventually it catches and burns with a steady flame that fills the small space with warmth and the smell of burning salt. You heat water in your improvised container and use it to wash your hands and face, scrubbing away the salt and sand and dirt that have accumulated over the day. The warm water feels luxurious against your skin, and you take your time with the simple task, savoring the small pleasure of being clean. Your dinner consists of the remaining ship's biscuit and a few more of the berries you found, which you have decided to risk eating. They are tart and leave your mouth feeling dry, but they provide something approaching flavor in a diet that has been notable mainly for its blandness. As you eat, you listen to the sounds of the night beginning around your small fire. The waves continue their endless rhythm, but now you can also hear other sounds. The rustle of small animals moving through the grass, the call of night birds, the whisper of wind through the trees behind you. The world is not as empty as it first seemed. You spend some time trying to repair one of your shirts using thread pulled carefully from the hem of another garment. The work is delicate and frustrating in the flickering firelight, and your fingers are clumsy with cold and exhaustion. But gradually, you manage to close a tear in the sleeve, and the small accomplishment feels larger than it should. Before sleep, you step outside your shelter and look up at the sky. The clouds have parted slightly, revealing a few stars scattered across the darkness like salt spilled on black cloth. You search for constellations you might recognize, some connection to the navigation that brought you to this place, but the stars seem different here, arranged in patterns that speak of distances too great to comprehend. The second night passes more easily than the first. Your body is beginning to adapt to sleeping on the ground, and the improvements you made to your shelter keep out more of the wind and rain. But you still wake several times, disturbed by dreams of the ship breaking apart and the sensation of water closing over your head. The third day dawns clear and bright, the first real sunshine you have seen since washing up on this beach. The warmth on your face as you emerge from your shelter feels like a gift, and you stand for several minutes just letting the light soak into your cold body. The sunshine changes everything. You strip off all your clothes and spread them on the sand and on pieces of driftwood, finally giving them a real chance to dry. Your skin is pale and goose-bumped in the morning air, but the sun feels warm enough that you believe you might be able to stay undressed long enough for your garments to lose some of their persistent dampness. While your clothes dry, you walk naked along the beach, searching for anything new that the tide might have brought in during the night. The sand feels different under your bare feet, more immediate and alive than it did through the leather of your boots. Each step brings new sensations. The warmth of dry sand, the coolness of wet sand, the sharp pinprick of a broken shell, the smooth roundness of a water-worn stone. You find several items of interest. A wooden bucket with only a few staves missing, a length of chain that might be useful for something, and what appears to be a portion of sailcloth larger and in better condition than the canvas you have been using for shelter. Each discovery feels significant, another small piece in the puzzle of your survival. The bucket, once you repair it with some of the rope, proves invaluable for carrying water from the stream back to your camp. The first trip takes nearly 2 hours, walking carefully to avoid spilling the precious liquid, but the ability to have fresh water close at hand changes the entire character of your small settlement. You spend the afternoon working on expanding your shelter. Using the new sailcloth and some additional pieces of driftwood, you create a second room of sorts, a place where you can store the items you have collected and where you might be able to work on projects without being exposed to the wind and rain. The work is slow and requires frequent rest breaks. Your body is still recovering from the ordeal of the shipwreck, and tasks that would once have been simple now leave you breathless and shaking. But there is satisfaction in the work, in the gradual transformation of a pile of debris into something that resembles a human habitation. By late afternoon, your clothes are finally, miraculously, dry. You dress slowly, savoring the feeling of fabric that is merely damp rather than soaking wet. Your shirt feels lighter on your shoulders, and your breeches no longer cling uncomfortably to your legs. Even your boots, though still stiff with salt, no longer squish with every step. As the sun begins to set, you climb to the top of a nearby dune and look out over the ocean. The water stretches to the horizon in all directions, empty of any sign of sail or smoke or any indication that other human beings exist in the world. The loneliness hits you then like a physical blow, and you have to sit down in the sand until the feeling passes. But as you sit there, watching the sun sink toward the water, you begin to notice other things. The way the light changes color as it moves across the waves. The patterns that the wind makes on the surface of the sea. The endless variety of sounds that the water makes as it moves. Sometimes a whisper, sometimes a roar, sometimes something in between that has no name. You return to your shelter as the first stars appear, and you build up your fire against the coming night. Your dinner is more varied tonight. The tubers you found yesterday, roasted in the coals until they are soft and sweet. A few strips of seaweed that you dried in the sun and found to be salty but edible, and water that tastes clean and cold and like life itself. As you eat, you begin to think about time differently. The days no longer feel like interruptions in your real life, temporary obstacles to be endured until rescue arrives. Instead, they are becoming something else. A different kind of existence, with its own rhythms and requirements and small satisfactions. You work by firelight on various small projects. You braid some of the thinner rope into fishing line, though you have no hook and are not sure what you might use for bait. You practice knots that you half remember from watching the sailors on the ship, your fingers working slowly in the flickering light until muscle memory begins to return. You sort through the items you have collected, organizing them by usefulness and condition. The bone comb, though damaged, still works well enough to untangle some of the knots in your hair. The coins are worthless here, but they are small and solid and somehow comforting to hold. The broken iron might be shaped into some kind of tool, though you are not sure how. Before sleep, you step outside and look up at the stars again. They seem brighter tonight, more numerous, as if the clear day has washed the sky clean. You can see the Milky Way stretched across the darkness like a river of light, and for a moment the vastness of it all is overwhelming. But then you return to your small shelter, to the warmth of your fire and the familiar sound of waves on sand, and the world shrinks back down to a manageable size. You curl up in your bed of grass and canvas, listening to the night sounds that are becoming as familiar as your own breathing, and you sleep. The fourth day begins with the sound of gulls crying very close to your shelter. When you emerge, you find that they have discovered some of the seaweed you left drying on the sand, and they are squabbling over it with the kind of intensity that speaks of creatures who understand hunger intimately. You watch them for a while, noting how they move and where they go when they are not fighting over food. They seem to know something you do not about this place, some secret about where to find what they need to survive. You make a mental note to follow them later, to see if they might lead you to something useful. The morning is spent on maintenance tasks that are becoming routine. You check your shelter for damage from the night's wind, readying ropes that have loosened and adjusting pieces of canvas that have shifted. You tend your fire, feeding it carefully with driftwood and making sure it has enough fuel to last through the day. You walk to the stream for water, and the journey no longer feels like an expedition into unknown territory. Your feet have worn a path through the grass and between the trees, and you know exactly how many steps it takes from your camp to the sound of running water. The familiarity is both comforting and slightly disturbing, a sign of how quickly human beings can adapt to almost any circumstance. At the stream, you take time to wash yourself more thoroughly than you have since arriving on this beach. You use sand to scrub your skin until it feels clean and new, and you wash your hair with water that runs clear and cold over your scalp. The simple act of being clean makes you feel more human, more like the person you were before the ship went down. On the way back from the stream, you follow the gulls as you planned. They lead you along the edge of the forest to a place where a second, smaller stream joins the first. Here, you discover tide pools left by the higher water of several days ago, and in them you find small crabs and other creatures that scuttle away when you approach. The crabs are quick, but you are patient. You move slowly and wait until they forget you are there, then snatch them up with movements that are becoming more confident with practice. They are small, barely mouthfuls each, but they represent the first fresh meat you have had since the shipwreck. You carry your catch back to camp in the wooden bucket, covering it with seaweed to keep the crabs from escaping. The bucket sloshes slightly as you walk, and the sound is accompanied by the occasional clicking of claws against wood. It is a good sound, the sound of successful hunting. Cooking the crabs over your fire takes some experimentation. You roast them directly in the coals at first, but this burns the shells and makes them difficult to eat. Then you try boiling them in water heated in your improvised container, and this works better. The meat, when you finally extract it from the shells, is sweet and tender and tastes like victory. The afternoon is devoted to a project you have been thinking about for days, creating a more permanent structure for collecting rainwater. Using the sailcloth and some carefully bent pieces of driftwood, you construct a funnel system that will direct rain into your bucket. The work requires careful measurement and adjustment, and several times you have to take apart what you have built and start over. But eventually, you create something that looks like it might actually work. You test it by pouring water from your container onto the sailcloth, and most of it runs down into the bucket as intended. It is not perfect, but it is functional, and you feel the satisfaction of solving a problem through careful thought and persistent effort. As evening approaches, you climb your observation dune again and scan the horizon. This has become a daily ritual, though you are beginning to understand that rescue, if it comes at all, is not likely to come quickly. Ships do not often pass this way, and even if they did, your small fire and improvised signals would be easy to miss from any distance. But the ritual is not really about rescue anymore. It is about marking the passage of time, about maintaining some connection to the larger world even as you become more deeply rooted in this small piece of it. You watch the sun set and the stars emerge, and you feel the day settling into memory like sediment in still water. Your dinner tonight includes the crab meat, mixed with roasted tubers and seasoned with dried seaweed. It is by far the best meal you have had since arriving here, varied in flavor and texture and genuinely satisfying. You eat slowly, making it last, grateful for the small luxury of food that actually tastes good. After dinner, you work on improving your fishing line. You have found several sharp shells that might serve as hooks if you can figure out how to attach them properly to the braided rope. The work is delicate and requires good light, so you move close to the fire and work slowly, testing each knot and adjustment. The shells are fragile and break easily, but eventually you create something that looks like it might catch a fish, if you can figure out the right bait and the right technique. You are not an experienced fisherman, but you are becoming experienced at learning through trial and error, at accepting failure as part of the process of eventual success. Before sleep, you write in the sand near your fire using a piece of charcoal from the edge of the coals. Not words, for you have neither the materials nor the inclination for a proper journal, but marks that represent the days you have been here. 4 vertical lines, each one representing a sunrise you have witnessed from this beach. You look at the marks for a long time, trying to understand what they mean. 4 days is not a long time in the life you lived before, barely more than a long weekend. But these 4 days feel different, denser somehow, packed with experiences and sensations and small discoveries that make them seem much longer than their calendar measurement would suggest. You sleep well on the 4th night, your body finally beginning to adapt to the rhythms of this place. You wake only once, when a night bird calls close to your shelter, but you fall back asleep quickly, lulled by the familiar sound of waves and the warm presence of coals glowing in your fire. The 5th day dawns gray and humid, with heavy clouds that promise more rain before evening. You emerge from your shelter to find the air thick and still, holding moisture like a saturated sponge that might release its contents at any moment. Your clothes, which had finally begun to feel dry, immediately begin to absorb humidity from the air around you. You spend the early morning checking and improving your rainwater collection system, adding additional cloth and adjusting angles to capture as much water as possible when the storm arrives. The work is methodical and absorbing, requiring attention to small details that keep your mind occupied and your hands busy. The gulls are more active today, flying in agitated patterns and calling to each other with what sounds almost like conversation. You watch them and try to understand what they are responding to, whether it is the approaching weather or something else entirely. Their behavior suggests an awareness of things beyond your human perception, a sensitivity to changes in the environment that might be useful to learn. You walk to the stream earlier than usual, before the rain begins, and you take time to explore further upstream than you have gone before. The water leads you deeper into the forest, through areas where the trees grow taller and the canopy blocks more of the sky. Here, the air is cooler and the sounds are different. Less wind, more bird calls, the occasional rustle of small animals moving through the underbrush. About a quarter mile from your usual drinking spot, you discover that the stream widens into a pool perhaps 10 feet across and deep enough that you cannot see the bottom in the center. The water is dark and still, reflecting the gray sky like a mirror. Around the edges, you can see small fish moving in the shadows, the first fish you have encountered since arriving here. You kneel by the pool and watch the fish for a long time, trying to understand their patterns and behavior. They seem to move in response to insects landing on the surface of the water, and you realize that this might be where your improvised fishing line could actually be useful. You make note of the location and the time of day, planning to return when you have prepared proper bait. The walk back to camp takes you through areas of the forest you have not explored before. You discover several new types of berries, including some that are larger and more colorful than those you found near the stream. You are still cautious about eating unfamiliar plants, but you collect small samples to take back to camp for careful testing. By the time you reach your shelter, the first drops of rain are beginning to fall. Large, warm drops that hit the sand with soft impacts and leave dark circles that disappear almost immediately as the dry earth absorbs them. You hurry to secure your belongings and prepare for what looks like it will be a substantial storm. The rain, when it comes in earnest, is unlike anything you experienced during your previous days here. It falls in sheets that blur the boundary between air and water, turning the world into a gray confusion of moving moisture. The sound on your canvas shelter is loud enough that you have to raise your voice to hear yourself think. But your rainwater collection system works better than you had hoped. Within an hour, your bucket is full, and you have to empty it into other containers to keep the system functioning. By the end of the storm, you have collected more fresh water than you have had access to since arriving on this beach. The storm lasts most of the day, keeping you inside your shelter with little to do except tend your fire and work on small projects. You test the new berries you found, eating just a few and waiting to see how your body responds. They are sweeter than the others you have tried, with a flavor that reminds you vaguely of home and orchards and summer afternoons that now seem like they belong to someone else's life. You spend time braiding more rope from salvaged materials, working slowly and carefully to create cordage that is strong enough to be useful. The repetitive motion of the work is soothing, and you find your mind wandering to memories of the ship and the people who were on it with you. You wonder where they are now, whether any of them found their way to shore, whether you are truly alone or just the first to be rescued. As evening approaches and the rain finally begins to lighten, you venture outside to assess the changes the storm has brought to your small domain. The beach has been rearranged again, with new debris scattered along the high tide line. Your fire pit has filled with water, and you will need to rebuild it completely. But your shelter has held, and your water collection system has proven its worth. You find several interesting items among the new debris. A metal cup with a dented rim but no holes, a piece of leather that might once have been part of a boot, and a wooden-handled tool that could be useful for digging. Each discovery feels like a gift from the sea, compensation for the challenges of the storm. The evening meal preparation takes longer than usual because you have to rebuild your fire completely. The old coals are cold and sodden, and you have to start fresh with flint and steel and dry tinder you kept stored in the driest part of your shelter. But eventually flames catch and grow, and soon you have a fire that pushes back the gray dampness of the post-storm evening. You cook some of the new berries into a kind of sauce, mashing them with water and heating the mixture over the fire until it thickens slightly. Combined with roasted tubers and the last of your crab meat, it makes a meal that is almost elaborate by the standards you have become accustomed to. After dinner, you work by firelight to organize the new items you found, fitting them into the systems of storage and organization you have developed over the past few days. Everything has its place now, and new acquisitions require thoughtful integration into the larger scheme of your survival. The night is warm and humid after the rain, and you sleep with the canvas walls of your shelter partially open to allow air circulation. The sound of dripping water from the trees joins the eternal rhythm of the waves, creating a complex soundscape that speaks of a world where water moves in many different ways, all of them patient, all of them persistent. You wake during the night to the sound of something large moving through the forest behind your camp. You lie still and listen, your heart beating faster as you try to identify what kind of creature might be making such sounds. But whatever it is moves away without approaching your fire, and eventually you fall back asleep, reassured by the knowledge that you are not the only large living thing in this place. The sixth day dawns clear and bright, the air washed clean by the previous day's rain. Everything looks sharper and more vivid, as if the storm has removed a layer of dust from the world. Your spirits lift with the sun, and you feel more energetic than you have since arriving on this beach. You begin the day with a more thorough exploration of the new debris field created by the storm. Among the items scattered by the waves, you find several pieces that could be very useful. A section of deck planking that could serve as a work surface, a coil of thicker rope than any you have found before, and what appears to be part of a compass, though the needle is missing and the glass is cracked. Most significantly, you discover a small cask that has washed up mostly intact. When you pry it open with the iron tool you found earlier, you find that it contains ship's biscuit that is dry and still edible, though probably months old even before the shipwreck. The quantity is not large, perhaps enough for a week if you are careful, but it represents a substantial addition to your food supply. You spend the morning organizing your expanded inventory and planning improvements to your camp. The section of deck planking, once you drag it to a level spot near your shelter, creates a proper work surface for the first time since your arrival. You can sit or kneel beside it and have a clean, dry place to prepare food, work on tools, or organize your belongings. The new rope is thick enough that you can use it to create a more secure framework for your shelter. You spend several hours readying and reinforcing the structure, adding guy lines that anchor it more firmly to the pieces of driftwood you have driven into the sand. The work is satisfying and methodical, each knot and adjustment making your temporary home feel more permanent and secure. By midday, you decide to return to the pool you discovered yesterday, carrying your improvised fishing line and hoping to catch some of the small fish you observed there. The walk through the forest feels different now, more familiar. Your feet know where to step to avoid the soft spots and the hidden roots, and you move with the confidence of someone who belongs in this landscape. At the pool, you spend time observing the fish again, noting their feeding patterns and the times when they are most active. You experiment with different types of bait. Small insects you catch by hand, pieces of the ship's biscuit, fragments of crab shell from your previous meal. The fish are wary and your technique is clumsy, but eventually you manage to catch 2 small fish, each about the length of your hand. The fish are beautiful creatures, silver and green with scales that catch the light like tiny mirrors. You feel a moment of regret at taking their lives, but hunger and the practical requirements of survival overcome sentiment. You kill them quickly and cleanly, and you carry them back to camp with the satisfaction of a successful hunt. Preparing the fish for cooking requires skills you have never needed before. You use a sharp piece of shell to clean them, working slowly and carefully to avoid wasting any of the meat. The process is messy and imprecise, but eventually you have 2 fish that are ready for the fire. Cooked over the coals, the fish taste like abundance. The meat is white and flaky and flavored with the clean taste of fresh water. You eat slowly, picking out the small bones and savoring each bite. It is the best meal you have had since the shipwreck, and it fills you with a sense of accomplishment that goes beyond mere nutrition. The afternoon is spent on a project you have been contemplating for several days, creating a more permanent signal fire that could be seen from a greater distance. Using the deck planking as a base, you construct a platform that will elevate burning material above the surrounding dunes. The work requires careful engineering to ensure the structure is stable and will not collapse when loaded with fuel. You gather large quantities of the driest wood you can find, along with materials that will produce thick smoke when burned. Green branches, seaweed, anything that will create a visible signal. The pile grows throughout the afternoon, and by evening you have assembled what you hope will be an effective beacon if you ever spot a ship on the horizon. As the sun begins to set, you climb your observation dune for the daily ritual of scanning the sea. The water stretches empty to the horizon as always, but tonight you feel less discouraged by the absence of ships. Your camp is becoming more sophisticated, your skills are improving, and you are beginning to understand that survival is not just about enduring until rescue arrives. It is about creating a life, however temporary, in the place where you find yourself. Your evening meal includes more of the fish, supplemented with berries and tubers and seasoned with seaweed. You eat by the light of your fire, listening to the night sounds of the forest and the eternal rhythm of the waves. The meal feels almost civilized, a proper dinner eaten at a proper table, even if both the dinner and the table are improvised from the wreckage of your previous life. After eating, you work on improving your fishing equipment. Using the metal cup you found, you create a small container for holding live bait. The cup is dented but watertight, and you can fill it with water from the stream to keep insects and small creatures alive until you need them for fishing. You also work on creating additional hooks from the sharp shells you have collected. The process requires patience and delicate work, shaping the shells with pieces of stone until they resemble something that might actually catch a fish. Several break in the process, but eventually you have 3 hooks that look functional, giving you backups in case you lose one while fishing. Before sleep, you add another mark to your calendar in the sand. 6 vertical lines now, representing 6 sunrises on this beach. The marks are beginning to look like something permanent, a record of time passing in a place where time moves differently than it did in your previous life. You realize that you are no longer counting the days until rescue arrives. Instead, you are simply counting the days, marking the passage of time in a life that has its own rhythm and requirements. The change in perspective is subtle but significant, a shift from enduring to inhabiting. The 7th morning arrives with mist rising from the warm sand, creating an otherworldly landscape where the boundary between earth and sky becomes uncertain. You emerge from your shelter to find your world transformed into something ethereal and dreamlike, with familiar objects appearing and disappearing in the shifting gray. The mist carries sounds differently, muffling some and amplifying others. The waves seem closer and more immediate, while the forest sounds fade into mysterious whispers that could be wind or wildlife or something else entirely. You move carefully through this changed environment, your other senses heightened to compensate for the limitations of sight. You make your way to the stream through the mist, following the path your feet have worn through the grass and between the trees. The journey takes longer than usual as you stop frequently to reorient yourself, but eventually you hear the sound of water running over stones and know you have found your destination. The stream appears suddenly out of the mist, its surface dark and smooth except where it ripples over obstacles. You fill your water containers and take time to wash your face and hands in the cold water. The shock of the cold feels good against your skin, a sharp sensation that cuts through the dreamlike quality of the morning. On the walk back to camp, the mist begins to lift, revealing the landscape in stages like a curtain being slowly drawn back. First the tops of the dunes appear, then the larger pieces of driftwood, then finally your shelter and the remains of your fire from the night before. The familiar sight of your small domain is reassuring after the disorientation of moving through the fog. You spend the morning working on camp maintenance, tasks that have become routine but remain necessary. You check the lashings on your shelter, adjust the rainwater collection system, and reorganize your belongings. Each task is performed with the careful attention of someone who understands that small details can make the difference between comfort and misery. The mist finally clears completely by midday, revealing a landscape that looks newly washed and extraordinarily clear. Colors seem more vivid, and you can see farther in all directions than you have been able to since arriving here. The clarity extends to the ocean as well, and for the first time you can see the texture of the water far from shore. The way swells move across the surface in long patterns that speak of weather systems and currents beyond the horizon. You use the clear weather to make a more thorough exploration of your territory than you have attempted before. Walking north along the beach, you discover that the shoreline curves inland about a mile from your camp, creating a small bay protected from the worst of the ocean swells. The beach here is different, with finer sand and tide pools that are larger and more diverse than any you have found near your shelter. The tide pools contain a variety of creatures you have not seen before. Sea anemones that close when you touch them, hermit crabs scuttling about in borrowed shells, and small fish trapped by the receding tide. You collect several of the larger crabs and some of the unusual shellfish, adding variety to your diet and expanding your understanding of the resources available in this place. You also discover fresh water seeping from the rocks at the back of the bay, a small spring that creates a pool of clear water just above the high tide line. The water tastes clean and cold, and the spring appears to be constant rather than dependent on recent rainfall. This could be a more reliable water source than the stream in the forest, and closer to your main camp. The walk back along the beach gives you time to think about what you have learned and how it might change your approach to living in this place. The bay offers resources and protection that could make your situation more comfortable, but it would also mean abandoning the shelter and infrastructure you have spent a week building. The decision is not urgent, but it represents the kind of choice that speaks to longer-term planning rather than immediate survival. You spend the afternoon processing your new food finds and preparing them for cooking. The shellfish require careful cleaning and preparation, work that is unfamiliar but not difficult once you understand the basic principles. The crabs are similar to ones you have caught before, but larger and meatier, promising a more substantial meal. As you work, you find yourself thinking about the people who might have lived in this place permanently, the indigenous inhabitants who would have known all the secrets you are slowly discovering through trial and error. They would have understood the seasonal patterns of the fish, the best times to gather different types of shellfish, the plants that are safe to eat and those that should be avoided. Your survival feels crude and inefficient compared to the knowledge they would have possessed. But there is satisfaction in the learning process, in the gradual accumulation of skills and understanding that comes from direct experience with the natural world. Each small success builds on the previous ones, creating a foundation of knowledge that is personally earned rather than inherited or taught. Your evening meal is the most elaborate yet. Roasted fish from the morning's catch, steamed shellfish cooked in seawater, and a variety of plant foods seasoned with salt extracted from dried seaweed. You eat slowly, appreciating the complex flavors and textures that represent the successful integration of multiple food sources. After dinner, you work on creating a map of your territory, drawing in the sand with a stick and using small stones to mark important features. The exercise helps you visualize the relationship between different resources and think more strategically about how to use the landscape to your advantage. The map shows your camp at the center, with lines radiating out to the stream in the forest, the new bay to the north, and the various resource-gathering areas you have discovered. Looking at it laid out this way, you begin to see patterns and connections that were not obvious when you were moving through the landscape one piece at a time. Before sleep, you climb your observation dune and look out over the water. The evening is exceptionally clear, and you can see farther than usual in all directions. No ships appear on the horizon, but you find that the absence of vessels no longer fills you with the same desperate anxiety it once did. Instead, there is a calm acceptance of your situation and a growing confidence in your ability to thrive in this place. The 8th day begins with the sound of heavy surf, waves larger than any you have experienced since your arrival. The sound is deeper and more powerful, a constant roar that speaks of storms somewhere far out at sea. When you emerge from your shelter, you can see white caps extending to the horizon and waves breaking with unusual force on the beach in front of your camp. The high surf has brought new debris during the night, including several large pieces of timber that could be useful for construction projects. But it has also made the beach more dangerous, with waves reaching higher up the sand than usual and undercutting some of the dunes where you have been walking. You spend the morning salvaging what you can from the new debris while staying well clear of the active surf zone. Among the items you recover are several pieces of iron hardware that could be shaped into tools, a length of chain even longer than the one you found earlier, and what appears to be part of a ship's wheel, though most of the wood has been stripped away, leaving only the metal fittings. The heavy surf makes it impossible to reach the tide pools where you have been gathering shellfish, and the stream seems more turbulent than usual, probably responding to runoff from storms inland. You adapt your plans for the day, focusing on tasks that can be accomplished safely within your established camp area. You use some of the new timber to begin construction of a more substantial shelter, one that could withstand stronger weather than the canvas and driftwood structure you have been using. The work is slow and requires careful planning, but the promise of a more permanent and comfortable living space motivates you to persist despite the physical demands of the construction. The new shelter design incorporates lessons learned from a week of living in this environment. The floor will be raised slightly above the sand to improve drainage, the walls will be angled to deflect wind more effectively, and the interior will be large enough to accommodate not just sleeping space but also areas for food preparation and storage. By midday, you have completed the foundation and begun work on the frame. The construction requires techniques you have never used before, but the principles are logical and you work through the problems systematically. Each joint must be secure enough to hold under stress, and each structural element must contribute to the overall stability of the building. The physical demands of construction are significant, and you have to take frequent breaks to rest and hydrate. Your hands develop new calluses and your arms ache from the unaccustomed work, but there is deep satisfaction in creating something substantial and permanent from the raw materials provided by the sea. As afternoon approaches, the surf begins to calm slightly, though it remains too dangerous for activities like fishing or gathering shellfish. You use the time to work on smaller projects that support your larger goals, braiding rope, sharpening tools, and organizing materials for the next day's construction work. You also spend time observing the changed behavior of the local wildlife in response to the heavy surf. The gulls are more active and seem to be feeding on things stirred up by the waves. Crabs and other creatures are moving higher up the beach than usual, seeking shelter from the turbulent water. Their behavior provides useful information about how this ecosystem responds to changing conditions. Your evening meal consists primarily of stored food, since the rough conditions have made it impossible to gather fresh provisions. You eat ship's biscuit and dried fish, supplemented with berries and tubers from previous foraging expeditions. The meal is simple but adequate, and you are grateful for the foresight that led you to build up reserves for exactly this kind of situation. After dinner, you work by firelight on planning the next stages of your construction project. Using charcoal and a piece of smooth wood, you sketch out details of joints and connections that will be needed to complete the new shelter. The planning process helps you think through potential problems before they arise during actual construction. The night is loud with the sound of surf, and you sleep fitfully, waking several times to the crash of particularly large waves. But your existing shelter holds up well to the conditions, and you remain dry and reasonably comfortable despite the dramatic weather outside. In your half-awake moments, you find yourself thinking about the ship that brought you here, wondering if it fought similar conditions before breaking apart. The thought is sobering, a reminder of the power of the sea and the fragility of human constructions in the face of natural forces. The ninth morning dawns calmer, with surf that has diminished to more normal levels, though still higher than the gentle waves of your first days here. You emerge from your shelter to find the beach transformed once again, with new patterns of debris and changes in the sand formations that speak to the power of the previous day's waves. Your first task is to assess any damage to your existing infrastructure and make necessary repairs. The rainwater collection system has been partially dismantled by the wind, and several pieces of stored materials have been scattered by the storm. But the damage is manageable, and within a few hours you have restored your camp to full functionality. You continue work on the new shelter, making good progress on the frame and beginning to think about materials for the walls and roof. The construction work is becoming more familiar, and you find yourself developing preferences for certain techniques and approaches based on what seems to work best with the available materials. The calmer conditions allow you to return to the tide pools for the first time in 2 days. You find that the storm has changed them significantly, with some pools filled in with sand while others have been scoured deeper than before. The populations of creatures have shifted as well, with some species more abundant than before while others seem to have disappeared entirely. You adapt your gathering techniques to the new conditions and manage to collect a good variety of shellfish and crabs. The work is harder than it was before the storm, requiring more walking and searching to find productive areas, but the results are satisfactory. You also discover several new types of seaweed that have been torn loose from deeper water and deposited in the pools. The afternoon is devoted to food preparation and preservation. You experiment with different methods of drying and smoking fish and shellfish, hoping to create reserves that will last longer than fresh food. The techniques require careful attention to fire management and timing, but the results show promise for extending your food security. You also work on processing some of the new seaweed varieties you found, testing them in small quantities to determine which ones are palatable and nutritious. The process of expanding your diet requires caution, but also represents an important step toward long-term sustainability in this environment. As evening approaches, you take time to evaluate your progress over the past week and a half. The changes are remarkable. From a person barely surviving on a hostile beach to someone who is actively improving their living situation and building skills for long-term success. The transformation feels both gradual and dramatic, a testament to human adaptability and persistence. Your evening meal showcases the diversity of food sources you have learned to exploit. Fresh fish grilled over the fire, steamed shellfish, roasted tubers, and a salad of edible seaweeds and berries. The meal is not only nutritious but genuinely enjoyable, a far cry from the desperate consumption of ship's biscuit that characterized your first days here. After dinner, you spend time working on the fishing equipment, creating additional hooks and improving the design of your lines based on experience gained over the past few days. The refinements are small but significant, each one representing a lesson learned through direct experience with the challenges of catching fish in this environment. Before sleep, you update your calendar in the sand, adding the 9th mark to the series. The marks are beginning to look like a substantial record, evidence of time spent not just surviving but living in this place. The shift in perspective continues to evolve, from viewing your situation as temporary to accepting it as a different kind of normal. The 10th morning arrives with perfect weather. Clear skies, gentle breeze, and calm seas that sparkle in the early sunlight. It is the kind of day that makes you grateful to be alive, regardless of the circumstances that brought you to this place. You emerge from your shelter feeling energetic and optimistic, ready to tackle ambitious projects. You begin the day with a comprehensive survey of your domain, walking the boundaries of your territory and noting changes, opportunities, and potential improvements. The walk takes you through all the different environments you have learned to navigate: beach, dune, forest, stream, and tide pools. Each area offers its own resources and challenges, and you are beginning to understand how they fit together into a complete ecosystem. The survey reveals several new possibilities you had not noticed before. A stand of trees near the stream includes specimens that produce a fibrous bark that could be useful for rope making. A section of rocky shore beyond the main tide pool area shows evidence of having different types of shellfish than those you have been harvesting. These discoveries expand your options and provide new projects to pursue. You spend the late morning working on the advanced construction of your new shelter. The frame is complete now, and you begin the challenging work of creating walls and a roof using available materials. The process requires innovation and problem solving, as you adapt traditional building techniques to work with driftwood, canvas, and salvaged materials. Each wall presents unique challenges in terms of fit and stability, and you find yourself developing skills in carpentry that you never knew you possessed. The work is slow and sometimes frustrating, but each completed section brings visible progress toward your goal of more comfortable and secure housing. By midday, you have completed 2 walls of the new structure and begun work on the third. The building is taking shape in a way that makes it look genuinely habitable rather than merely functional. The prospect of sleeping in a real shelter, with solid walls and a weatherproof roof, provides motivation to continue despite the physical demands of the work. You take a break from construction to make another fishing expedition to the pool in the forest. Your technique has improved significantly since your first attempts, and you managed to catch 3 fish in less than an hour. The success feels routine now rather than miraculous, evidence of skills developed through practice and persistence. The walk back from the pool gives you time to think about the longer-term implications of your situation. You have been here 10 days now, long enough to establish routines and develop competence in the basic skills of survival. But questions remain about rescue, about the outside world, about the life you left behind when the ship went down. These thoughts no longer bring the anxiety they once did. Instead, they feel like abstract considerations, important but not urgent. The immediate reality of your life in this place has become compelling enough to sustain your attention and energy without constant reference to alternatives. The afternoon is devoted to completing the third wall of your new shelter and beginning work on the roof structure. The roof presents the most complex engineering challenges, as it must be strong enough to support its own weight while also shedding rain and resisting wind. You work slowly and carefully, testing each joint and connection before proceeding to the next step. The construction work is interrupted by the arrival of a group of pelicans, large birds that fish in the surf zone and roost on the beach. You watch them for a long time, studying their fishing techniques and wondering if you might learn something useful from their approach to harvesting the sea's resources. The pelicans are remarkably efficient hunters, diving from considerable heights and emerging with fish that seem disproportionately large for their size. Their presence also suggests that the fish populations in the area are healthy and abundant, information that could be useful for your own fishing efforts. As evening approaches, you complete the basic structure of the new shelter. The building is not yet weatherproof, but it represents a substantial achievement in terms of both engineering and craftsmanship. Standing inside the framed structure, you can envision what it will be like to live in a space that feels more like a home than a survival shelter. Your evening meal is a celebration of the day's accomplishments. The fish caught at the pool, prepared with techniques you have refined over the past week. You eat inside the framework of your new shelter, imagining what it will be like when the walls are complete and the space is fully enclosed. After dinner, you work on gathering materials for the final phase of construction. Palm fronds and large pieces of bark could serve as roofing material, while smaller pieces of wood and rope will be needed to secure everything in place. The material gathering is easier now than it would have been a week ago, as you know exactly where to find what you need. Before sleep, you spend time reflecting on the transformation of your situation over the past 10 days. The beach that once seemed hostile and alien now feels familiar and manageable. The skills that once seemed impossible to master have become routine. The future that once seemed hopeless now appears full of possibilities. You add the 10th mark to your calendar in the sand, and the row of lines looks substantial now, a record of real time spent building a real life in this place. The marks no longer represent days endured but days lived, each one containing its own experiences, challenges, and small victories. The 11th day begins with you waking inside the framework of your new shelter for the first time. Even without walls, the structure provides a different sense of space and security than your old canvas arrangement. The morning light filters through the framework in patterns that remind you of the windows and doorways of more conventional buildings. Your first task is to complete the weatherproofing of the new shelter. Using palm fronds, bark, and canvas, you create a roof that should shed rain and provide protection from sun and wind. The work requires careful attention to overlap and drainage, as any gaps could lead to leaks that would make the interior uncomfortable during storms. The roofing work is completed by midday, and you spend the afternoon creating a floor using flat pieces of driftwood fitted together like puzzle pieces. The floor raises your living space above the sand and provides a clean, dry surface for sleeping and working. The improvement in comfort is immediate and significant. With the basic structure complete, you begin the process of moving your belongings from the old shelter to the new one. This involves reorganizing everything you have accumulated over the past 10 days, sorting items by function and frequency of use. The process reveals how much you have collected and how organized your survival efforts have become. The new shelter is large enough to accommodate distinct areas for different activities: sleeping, food preparation, toolmaking, and storage. This spatial organization represents a significant improvement in quality of life, allowing you to maintain better hygiene and work more efficiently on various projects. You spend the late afternoon testing the weatherproofing of your new home by creating a small fire inside and observing how the smoke disperses. The ventilation is adequate, and the structure seems sound. You feel a deep satisfaction at having created something substantial and functional using only materials provided by the sea and the forest. Your evening meal is the first cooked and eaten inside your new shelter. The space feels genuinely homelike, with the flickering fire casting warm light on the walls and creating an atmosphere of comfort and security. You eat slowly, savoring both the food and the environment you have created for yourself. After dinner, you work on final improvements to the shelter: additional lashings for security, small shelves for storage, and a more efficient arrangement of your belongings. Each adjustment makes the space more livable and reflects your growing understanding of how to organize a dwelling for maximum efficiency and comfort. Before sleep, you step outside and look at your new home from the perspective of someone approaching from the beach. The structure looks substantial and well crafted, clearly the work of someone who intends to stay rather than merely survive. The transformation from desperate survivor to competent builder feels complete. The 12th day dawns with you waking in your new home, and the sensation is profoundly different from sleeping on the ground under canvas. The enclosed space feels private and secure, and the raised floor keeps you completely dry despite dew that has formed on the grass outside. You stretch and feel rested in a way that has not been possible since the shipwreck. Your morning routine now includes maintenance of a more complex living situation. You check the lashings and joints of your shelter, tend a fire that is now contained within a proper hearth, and organize your belongings in the various storage areas you have created. The tasks feel domestic rather than merely functional, part of maintaining a home rather than just surviving. You spend the morning exploring areas of your territory that you have not visited recently, checking for changes and new opportunities. The landscape continues to evolve in response to tides, weather, and seasons, and your understanding of its patterns grows more sophisticated with each day of observation. Near the bay you discovered several days ago, you find evidence of a fresh water spring that is larger and more reliable than the one you have been using. The water is crystal clear and cold, emerging from rocks in a flow that suggests a substantial underground source. This discovery could significantly improve your water security and reduce the time spent on daily water gathering. You also discover new varieties of edible plants growing in areas where fresh water seeps into the soil. These plants are different from the forest species you have been harvesting, and they appear to be more nutritious and flavorful. The diversity of food sources continues to expand as your knowledge of the local ecosystem deepens. The afternoon is spent on a major fishing expedition, using all the skills and equipment you have developed over the past week and a half. You fish at different times and locations, experiment with various types of bait, and employ different techniques to maximize your catch. The results are impressive. Enough fish to provide meals for several days if properly preserved. You spend the evening processing your catch using smoking and drying techniques you have refined through experimentation. The work is time-consuming but results in preserved fish that should remain edible for weeks rather than days. This food security represents a major step forward in your long-term sustainability. Your dinner includes both fresh and preserved fish, prepared in different ways to highlight their distinct flavors and textures. The variety and quality of the meal would be impressive in any context, and in your current situation it feels almost luxurious. You eat by the light of your hearth fire, comfortable and secure in your well-built home. After dinner, you work on advanced projects that would not have been possible during your first week here. Using tools you have crafted and techniques you have learned, you begin construction of furniture, a proper chair, a table, storage chests. Each piece represents not just utility but also a commitment to living well in this place. Before sleep, you add the 12th mark to your calendar. The row of lines is becoming substantial, a record of nearly 2 weeks spent not just surviving but thriving in this environment. You realize that you are no longer the same person who washed up on this beach 12 days ago. The experience has changed you in ways that go far beyond the acquisition of practical skills. The 13th morning brings with it a sense of routine and competence that would have seemed impossible during your first days here. You wake rested and comfortable, quickly assess the condition of your shelter and surroundings, and begin the day's activities with confidence and purpose. Your morning tasks now include tending a small garden where you are experimenting with growing some of the edible plants you have discovered. The garden is just a few square feet of cleared ground near your shelter, but it represents an important step toward greater food security and self-sufficiency. The seedlings are small but healthy, showing promise for future harvests. You spend the late morning on an ambitious project, creating a more sophisticated fishing setup at the pool in the forest. Using rope, hooks, and a system of weights and floats, you construct what amounts to a small fishing trap that can work even when you are not present. The engineering is complex, but the potential for increased food production makes the effort worthwhile. The trap requires several hours to complete and involves techniques you have never used before. But your problem-solving abilities have been sharpened by nearly 2 weeks of constant challenges, and you work through each difficulty systematically. The finished product looks professional and functional, a testament to skills developed through necessity and persistence. Testing the new fishing system requires patience and fine-tuning, but eventually you achieve the results you hoped for. The trap catches fish more efficiently than manual fishing, and it works continuously rather than only when you are present. This automation represents a significant improvement in your food production capabilities. The afternoon is spent on exploration and resource gathering in areas you have not visited for several days. You discover that your territory contains even more diversity than you initially realized, with microenvironments that support different types of plants and animals. Each discovery expands your options and increases your understanding of the place you now call home. You find a grove of fruit trees that are beginning to ripen, promising a new food source that will be available in a few more days. You also discover a deposit of clay near the stream that could be useful for making pottery or other crafts. These resources represent opportunities for continued improvement in your living situation. Your evening meal showcases the full range of your food production systems: fish from the automated trap, shellfish from the tide pools, vegetables from your garden, and fruits from your foraging expeditions. The variety and quality of the meal rivals anything you might have eaten in your previous life, and the satisfaction of having produced it all yourself adds an extra dimension to the dining experience. After dinner, you work on crafting projects that reflect your growing confidence and ambition. Using clay from the stream, you begin creating pottery vessels that will be more durable and functional than the improvised containers you have been using. The work is challenging but rewarding, requiring both technical skill and artistic sensibility. Before sleep, you reflect on how completely your perspective has changed over the past 13 days. What began as a desperate struggle for survival has evolved into something approaching a fulfilling lifestyle. You have not just adapted to this environment but have begun to thrive in it, creating systems and structures that support not just survival but comfort and even luxury. The 14th day begins with a confidence and sense of purpose that reflects your complete adaptation to life in this place. You wake early, not from anxiety or discomfort but from eagerness to begin the day's projects and activities. Your shelter feels like home, your routines feel natural, and your capabilities feel substantial. Your morning inspection reveals that your automated fishing trap has worked perfectly overnight, providing fresh fish for breakfast without any effort on your part. You clean and prepare the fish with movements that have become automatic, then cook them over a fire that starts easily with techniques you have mastered completely. You spend the morning working on advanced construction projects that would have been impossible during your first week here. Using tools you have crafted and skills you have developed, you begin building additional structures. A workshop for crafts, a smokehouse for preserving food, a shelter for storing materials. Each building represents an expansion of your capabilities and comfort. The construction work is complex and demanding, but you approach it with the confidence of someone who has already succeeded at similar challenges. Your hands know how to work with the available materials, your mind can envision solutions to engineering problems, and your body has adapted to the physical demands of sustained labor. By midday, you have made substantial progress on multiple projects. The workshop is framed and partially roofed, the smokehouse foundation is complete, and you have gathered most of the materials needed for the storage shelter. The rate of progress reflects not just improved skills but also better organization and planning. You take a break from construction to check on your various food production systems. The garden shows continued growth, the fishing trap continues to function perfectly, and your preserved foods are aging properly in the smokehouse. The integration of multiple systems creates a food security that goes far beyond mere survival. The afternoon is devoted to crafting activities that reflect your growing sophistication and ambition. You work with clay to create not just functional vessels but decorative objects that add beauty to your living space. You carve wood into furniture and tools that are not just useful but elegantly designed. Each creation reflects a commitment to living well rather than merely existing. You also spend time on activities that have no immediate practical purpose but contribute to your mental and emotional well-being. You create music using pieces of wood and metal tuned to different pitches. You draw pictures in sand and on smooth pieces of bark. These creative activities represent a return to aspects of human experience that go beyond survival needs. Your evening meal is elaborate and leisurely, featuring foods prepared using sophisticated techniques you have developed over the past 2 weeks. You eat at a proper table, sitting in a chair you crafted yourself, surrounded by the comfortable and attractive environment you have created. The meal feels like a celebration of human ingenuity and adaptability. After dinner, you work on projects that reflect long-term thinking rather than immediate needs. You begin crafting items that could serve as trade goods if you ever encounter other people. You start writing a record of your experiences using charcoal on pieces of bark, creating a document that preserves both practical knowledge and personal reflection. Before sleep, you step outside and survey your domain in the light of the setting sun. What you see is not just a survival camp but a small settlement, complete with multiple buildings, organized systems for resource production, and an overall design that reflects both efficiency and aesthetics. The transformation is remarkable, a testament to what human beings can accomplish when necessity meets determination. You add the 14th mark to your calendar, and the row of lines now represents a substantial period of time, 2 full weeks of life in this place. But more than time, the marks represent transformation. From desperate survivor to confident inhabitant, from someone trying to escape this place to someone who has made it home. As you prepare for sleep in your comfortable shelter, surrounded by the fruits of your labor and the evidence of your adaptation, you realize that rescue is no longer the central focus of your thoughts. Instead, you are thinking about tomorrow's projects, next week's goals, and the continuing evolution of your life in this place that was once alien but has become familiar. The waves continue their eternal rhythm outside your shelter, but the sound no longer speaks of danger or exile. Instead, it has become the heartbeat of this place, a steady pulse that ties your days together and marks the passage of time. You listen to it now as you lie on your woven grass bed, the new shelter's walls muffling the sound just enough to make it comforting rather than overwhelming. The air inside is cool but not cold, scented with the faint smokiness of your fire and the earthy tang of the palm fronds overhead. Your body, though still sore from days of labor, feels heavier now, sinking into the makeshift mattress as sleep begins to pull at the edges of your thoughts. You wake on the 15th morning to the soft patter of dew dripping from the roof onto the sand outside. The air is humid but clear, carrying the fresh smell of the sea mixed with the green scent of the forest waking up beyond your camp. You rise slowly, your joints stiff from sleep, and step outside to find the beach bathed in pale sunlight, the horizon sharp and endless. Your shelter stands solid against the dunes, its angles catching the light in a way that makes it look like it belongs here, as if it grew from the sand rather than being built by your hands. Your morning begins with the familiar tasks that have become your routine. You check the fishing trap at the pool, finding it has caught 2 small fish during the night. Their scales glint in the sunlight as you lift them from the water, and you handle them carefully, grateful for the steady supply they represent. You clean them with a sharp shell, the motions practiced now, your fingers moving with a precision that feels almost instinctive. The fish smell clean and slightly metallic, their flesh cool against your skin as you prepare them for smoking later in the day. Back at camp, you tend to your garden, kneeling in the soft earth to inspect the small plants pushing through the soil. The seedlings are delicate but strong, their leaves unfolding toward the sun. You water them carefully with water from the bucket, the liquid soaking into the ground with a soft hiss that blends with the distant sound of waves. The act of nurturing these plants feels like a quiet promise to yourself, a commitment to a future that extends beyond the next sunrise. The morning passes in a rhythm of small tasks. You check the lashings on your shelter, tightening ropes where the wind has loosened them. The thick cordage you braided from salvaged fibers feels solid in your hands, its texture rough but reassuring. You sweep the floor of your shelter with a bundle of grass, clearing away sand that has blown in during the night. Each sweep raises tiny clouds of dust that catch the sunlight, and you pause to watch them settle, the motion hypnotic in its simplicity. By midday, you decide to explore further along the northern bay, where the spring you discovered offers a reliable water source. The walk is pleasant, the sand firm beneath your bare feet, warmed by the sun but not yet hot enough to burn. The bay is quieter than the main beach, its waters sheltered by the curve of the shore. You kneel by the spring and drink deeply, the water cold and mineral sharp against your tongue. You fill your bucket, the weight of it pulling at your arms as you carry it back to camp, your steps slow and deliberate to avoid spilling a single drop. The afternoon is spent on improving your food preservation techniques. You build a small drying rack using branches lashed together with rope, positioning it where the sun is strongest and the breeze can carry away moisture. You lay out strips of fish and seaweed on the rack, arranging them carefully to maximize exposure to air and light. The fish smell rich and briny as you work, their surfaces glistening before the sun begins to dry them into leathery strips that will keep for weeks. You also experiment with the clay you found near the stream, shaping it into small bowls and firing them in the coals of your hearth. The process is slow, requiring careful attention to the fire's heat to avoid cracking the clay. You turn the pieces gently with a stick, watching as the wet gray surface turns hard and reddish brown. The first bowl you complete is imperfect, slightly uneven, but it holds water without leaking, and you feel a quiet pride at the accomplishment. As the sun begins to dip toward the horizon, you climb your observation dune to watch the sea. The ritual has become less about searching for rescue and more about connecting with the vastness of the world around you. The water reflects the changing colors of the sky, shifting from gold to pink to deep blue as the day fades. You sit with your knees drawn up, the sand still warm beneath you, and let your thoughts drift with the tide. The loneliness is still there, a quiet ache in your chest, but it is softer now, tempered by the life you have built. Your evening meal is a mix of preserved fish, roasted tubers, and a handful of the new berries you tested yesterday. The berries are tart and slightly sweet, their juice staining your fingers as you eat. You sit at your table, the wood smooth under your hands, and eat slowly, savoring the flavors and the comfort of your shelter. The fire in the hearth casts flickering shadows on the walls, and the warmth it provides feels like a small luxury after so many nights of damp cold. After dinner, you work on crafting a better fishing net, using thin strips of bark and fine rope braided from plant fibers. The work is intricate, requiring you to knot the material in a precise pattern to create a mesh fine enough to catch small fish. Your fingers move slowly in the firelight, occasionally fumbling but growing more confident with each knot. The net begins to take shape, a delicate web that promises to expand your ability to gather food from the sea. Before sleep, you step outside to look at the stars. The sky is clear tonight, a vast dome of black velvet scattered with points of light. You trace the patterns of constellations, some familiar, others strange and new in this place. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a river of stars, its glow soft but undeniable. You stand for a long time, breathing in the cool night air, feeling the vastness of the universe and your small but significant place within it. You add the 15th mark to your calendar in the sand, the charcoal scratching softly against the grains. The row of lines grows longer, a quiet record of your life here. You no longer think of them as days waiting for rescue but as days lived fully, each one building on the last. You return to your shelter, curl up on your bed of grass and fronds, and let the sound of the waves carry you into sleep. The 16th morning dawns with a gentle breeze that carries the scent of salt and wet sand. You wake to the soft creak of your shelter's frame settling in the wind, the sound familiar now, almost comforting. Your body feels rested, the aches of the first days replaced by a steady strength born of constant work and adaptation. You step outside and stretch, feeling the sun's warmth on your face, the sand cool and damp beneath your feet. You begin the day by checking your fishing trap and drying rack. The trap has caught another fish, smaller than yesterday's but still a valuable addition to your stores. The drying rack holds strips of fish and seaweed that are beginning to harden in the sun, their surfaces taking on a glossy sheen. You rearrange them slightly, ensuring even drying, and feel a quiet satisfaction at the efficiency of your systems. Your morning tasks include tending your garden, where the plants are growing noticeably taller. You weed carefully, pulling out small grasses that compete with your seedlings, your hands sinking into the soft earth. The soil smells rich and alive, and you take your time with the task, enjoying the tactile connection to the ground. You water the plants again, watching the earth darken as it absorbs the moisture, and imagine the day when you might harvest your first real crop. Midday finds you working on the smokehouse, which is now nearly complete. You add the final pieces of roofing, using bark and palm fronds layered to keep out rain. The structure is small but sturdy, designed to hold a fire that will produce smoke without flames, preserving food for longer periods. You test it with a small batch of fish, arranging them on racks inside and feeding the fire with green wood that produces thick, fragrant smoke. The smell fills the air, a mix of wood and salt and fish that feels like progress. The afternoon is spent foraging in the forest, following paths you have worn through the underbrush. You find more of the fibrous bark you identified yesterday and strip it carefully from the trees, your knife cutting clean lines through the tough material. The bark smells faintly of resin, and you carry it back to camp in bundles, already planning how to process it into stronger rope or even crude cloth. You also collect more clay from the stream, carrying it back in your bucket. The clay is heavy and sticks to your hands, leaving a cool, slick residue that takes effort to wash off. You spend time shaping it into new vessels, experimenting with different forms. A deeper bowl for cooking, a flat tray for drying herbs. The work is meditative, your hands moving with a rhythm that matches the sound of the waves in the distance. As evening approaches, you return to the bay to check the spring and gather more shellfish. The tide is low, exposing tide pools filled with small crabs and mussels. You move slowly, prying the shellfish from the rocks with a piece of sharpened wood, your hands steady and sure. The shells are rough against your fingers, their surfaces encrusted with tiny barnacles that scrape your skin as you work. You fill your bucket, the weight reassuring as you carry it back to camp. Your evening meal is a feast by your new standards. Smoked fish from the smokehouse, steamed mussels cooked in seawater, and roasted tubers seasoned with dried seaweed. You eat at your table, the fire casting a warm glow across the interior of your shelter. The flavors are rich and varied, the textures satisfying, and you take your time, letting each bite linger on your tongue. After dinner, you work on weaving a basket from the fibrous bark you collected. The material is tough but flexible, and you experiment with different weaving patterns to create a container that is both strong and attractive. The work is slow, requiring careful attention to keep the strands even, but the process is soothing, your hands finding a rhythm that feels almost like a dance. Before sleep, you step outside to check the stars. The sky is partly cloudy tonight, but patches of clear sky reveal constellations that are becoming familiar. You stand for a moment, breathing in the cool air, feeling the sand shift slightly under your feet. The world feels vast but no longer overwhelming, a place where you have carved out a small but meaningful existence. You add the 16th mark to your calendar, the charcoal leaving a clean line in the sand. The marks are a record not just of time but of growth, of a life that is becoming richer and more complex with each passing day. You return to your shelter, settle into your bed, and let the sound of the waves lull you into a deep, restful sleep. The 17th morning brings a change in the air, a faint chill that suggests the season may be shifting. You wake to find your breath visible in the cool air inside your shelter, a reminder that the world around you is not static. You rise and step outside, the sand cold under your feet, the sky a pale gray that promises a clear but cooler day. Your morning begins with the usual tasks, checking the fishing trap, tending the garden, inspecting the smokehouse. The trap holds 3 fish, a good haul that will keep your stores well stocked. The garden plants are thriving, their leaves broader and greener than they were even a day ago. The smokehouse is functioning perfectly, the fish inside taking on a rich, smoky flavor that will make them both delicious and long-lasting. You spend the late morning working on a new project, creating a better system for storing water. Using the clay vessels you fired earlier, you experiment with sealing them to prevent evaporation. You line one with melted resin from a tree in the forest, heating it over the fire until it becomes sticky and pliable. The resin smells sharp and piney, and you work carefully to coat the inside of the vessel, creating a waterproof seal that should keep water fresh for longer. The afternoon is spent exploring the rocky shore beyond the bay, where you found evidence of new shellfish varieties. The rocks are slippery with algae, and you move carefully, your bare feet finding purchase on the uneven surfaces. You discover a type of oyster you haven't seen before, larger and meatier than the mussels you've been collecting. You pry them open with your knife, the shells resisting before giving way with a soft crack. The meat inside is plump and briny, and you eat one raw, the flavor exploding on your tongue like the essence of the sea. You collect a bucketful of oysters and carry them back to camp, your arms aching from the weight but your spirits high. The oysters represent a new food source, one that could add variety and nutrition to your diet. You spend time cleaning and preparing them, saving some for immediate cooking and setting others aside for smoking or drying. As evening approaches, you climb your observation dune and watch the sun set over a calm sea. The water is smooth tonight, reflecting the sky's colors in a mirror-like expanse that stretches to the horizon. You sit with your arms wrapped around your knees, the sand still holding the day's warmth, and let your thoughts drift. The rhythm of your days feels like a song now, each task a note in a melody that is both simple and profound. Your evening meal includes the oysters, steamed over the fire in a clay vessel filled with seawater. The shells open in the heat, releasing a rich, briny aroma that fills your shelter. You eat them with roasted tubers and a handful of berries, the combination of flavors complex and satisfying. You sit at your table, the firelight warm on your face, and feel a deep contentment that comes from living well in a place that once seemed hostile. After dinner, you work on refining your furniture, adding a backrest to the chair you built to make it more comfortable. The wood is smooth under your hands, worn by the sea but still strong. You carve carefully, shaping the wood with a sharpened piece of iron, the shavings curling away and falling to the floor. The work is slow but rewarding, each cut bringing the chair closer to completion. Before sleep, you step outside to look at the stars. The sky is mostly clear now, the clouds having drifted away to reveal a canopy of light. You find a constellation you recognize, one that sailors used to navigate, and feel a fleeting connection to the life you left behind. But the connection is less urgent now, less necessary. This place, with its rhythms and challenges, has become your reality. You add the 17th mark to your calendar, the line joining its predecessors in a steady row. The marks are a testament to your endurance, your ingenuity, your ability to create a life from the wreckage of the old one. You return to your shelter, settle into your bed, and let the sound of the waves carry you into sleep, the fire flickering low in the hearth. The 18th morning dawns crisp and bright, the air carrying a sharpness that confirms the shift toward cooler weather. You wake to the sound of gulls calling close to your shelter, their cries sharp in the still air. You step outside and find them gathered near your drying rack, pecking at the fish you left out overnight. You shoo them away gently, checking to make sure no damage was done, and feel a quiet amusement at their persistence. Your morning tasks are familiar but take on new meaning in the cooler air. You check the fishing trap, finding it empty but still in good condition. You tend the garden, noting that the plants seem to be thriving in the changing weather, their leaves glistening with dew. You inspect the smokehouse, adding more green wood to keep the smoke thick and steady, the smell of it filling your shelter with a comforting familiarity. You spend the late morning working on a new project, creating a windbreak for your camp to protect it from the stronger breezes that come with the changing season. Using large pieces of driftwood and palm fronds, you build a low wall on the windward side of your shelter. The work requires digging shallow trenches to anchor the wood, the sand heavy and resistant under your hands. You move slowly, your breath visible in the cool air, and feel the satisfaction of creating something that will make your life more comfortable. The afternoon is spent foraging in the forest, where you find more of the fruit trees you discovered earlier. Some of the fruits are ripe now, their skins soft and yielding under your fingers. You taste one, the flavor sweet and slightly tart, and collect a basketful to bring back to camp. The weight of the basket pulls at your arms, but the promise of fresh fruit makes the effort worthwhile. You also gather more clay, carrying it back in your bucket and processing it into new vessels. The clay is smoother today, easier to work with, and you shape it into a larger pot that could be used for cooking or storing water. You fire it carefully in the coals, turning it to ensure even heating, the smell of burning clay mixing with the smoky scent of the fish in the smokehouse. As evening approaches, you climb your observation dune and watch the sea. The water is slightly rougher today, with small waves breaking in quick succession along the shore. The sky is clear, the horizon sharp, and you let your eyes drift across the expanse, no longer searching but simply observing. The act of looking has become a meditation, a way to connect with the world around you without needing it to change. Your evening meal is a celebration of your growing resources: fresh fruit, smoked fish, steamed oysters, and roasted tubers. You eat slowly, the firelight casting soft shadows on the walls of your shelter. The flavors are rich and varied, the textures satisfying, and you feel a deep gratitude for the abundance you have created from the raw materials of this place. After dinner, you work on weaving another basket, this one larger and designed to hold fruit or other perishables. The bark strips are tough but pliable, and you weave them with care, creating a pattern that is both functional and pleasing to the eye. The work is slow, your fingers moving with a steady rhythm that matches the sound of the waves outside. Before sleep, you step outside to look at the stars. The sky is clear and brilliant, the stars so numerous they seem to crowd each other out. You find a constellation that feels like an old friend, its shape unchanged despite the distance you have traveled. You stand for a moment, breathing in the cool night air, feeling the sand shift under your feet. You add the 18th mark to your calendar, the charcoal scratching softly in the quiet night. The row of lines is long now, a record of a life that has taken root in this place. You return to your shelter, settle into your bed, and let the fire's glow and the waves' rhythm carry you into a deep, dreamless sleep. The 19th morning dawns with a quiet stillness, the air heavy with the promise of rain. You wake to the sound of distant thunder, a low rumble that seems to come from far out at sea. You step outside and see dark clouds gathering on the horizon, their edges tinged with the pale light of dawn. The beach is calm, the sand damp from overnight dew, and you take a moment to breathe in the cool, heavy air. Your morning tasks are focused on preparing for the coming storm. You check the lashings on your shelter, reinforcing them with extra rope to ensure they hold against strong winds. You move your drying rack and stored food into the smokehouse, where they will be protected from rain. The work is methodical, your hands moving with the confidence of experience, the ropes and knots familiar under your fingers. You visit the spring at the bay to fill your water containers before the rain begins, the bucket heavy but manageable as you carry it back to camp. The spring's flow is steady, the water cold and clear, and you drink deeply, savoring the clean taste. You wash your face and hands, the water cool against your skin, washing away the salt and sand that still cling to you despite your efforts to stay clean. The late morning is spent working on the pottery you began yesterday. You fire another vessel, this one larger and more ambitious, designed to hold enough water for several days. The clay smells earthy and rich as it heats, and you watch the surface change color, the fire's heat drawing out moisture and leaving strength behind. The process is slow but satisfying, a reminder of how far your skills have come. The rain begins in the early afternoon, a soft drizzle at first that grows into a steady downpour. You retreat to your shelter, grateful for its solid walls and weatherproof roof. The sound of rain on the palm fronds is loud but soothing, a counterpoint to the distant waves. You sit by the hearth, feeding the fire with dry wood, and watch the smoke curl upward, the scent filling the space with warmth and familiarity. The afternoon passes slowly, the rain keeping you inside. You work on small projects, weaving another section of your fishing net, carving a wooden spoon from a piece of driftwood, organizing your growing collection of tools and supplies. Each task is small but meaningful, contributing to the efficiency and comfort of your life here. As evening approaches, the rain lightens to a fine mist, and you step outside to check your rainwater collection system. The buckets are full, the sailcloth funnel working perfectly to channel water into your containers. You pour the excess into clay vessels, sealing them with resin to keep the water fresh. The air smells clean and wet, the sand soft under your feet as you move around your camp. Your evening meal is simple but satisfying, made from stored foods to conserve fresh supplies during the rain. You eat smoked fish and dried fruit, the flavors rich and comforting in the cool, damp air. You sit at your table, the firelight casting a warm glow, and feel a sense of peace that comes from knowing your home is secure against the elements. After dinner, you work on a new project, creating a small flute from a hollow piece of wood. You carve carefully, shaping the wood with your knife and testing the sound with each adjustment. The notes are soft and uneven at first, but with time you create something that produces a clear, haunting tone. You play a few notes, the sound blending with the rain and waves, and feel a connection to something deeper than survival. Before sleep, you step outside to check the sky. The clouds are breaking apart, revealing patches of stars that gleam in the wet air. You stand for a moment, listening to the drip of water from the trees and the steady rhythm of the waves. The world feels alive and interconnected, and you are a part of it. You add the 19th mark to your calendar, the charcoal leaving a faint smudge in the damp sand. The marks are a record of time, but also of transformation, of a life built from the wreckage of the old one. You return to your shelter, settle into your bed, and let the sound of the rain and waves carry you into sleep, the fire flickering low in the hearth. The 20th morning dawns clear and cool, the storm having passed during the night. You wake to the sound of gulls calling in the distance, their cries sharp and insistent. You step outside and find the beach washed clean by the rain, the sand smooth and unmarked except for the tracks of crabs and birds. The air is fresh, carrying the scent of wet earth and sea, and you breathe deeply, feeling renewed. Your morning begins with checking your systems after the storm. The fishing trap is intact, with 2 fish caught during the night. The garden has benefited from the rain, the plants standing taller and greener than before. The smokehouse is dry, the food inside untouched by the weather. You feel a quiet pride in the resilience of the systems you have built, their ability to withstand the elements a testament to your growing skill. You spend the late morning working on the workshop, adding walls and a roof to create a space dedicated to crafting and tool-making. The work is slow, requiring careful fitting of driftwood and palm fronds, but the structure begins to take shape, its lines clean and functional. You envision a space where you can work on projects without worrying about wind or rain, a place that will make your daily tasks more efficient. The afternoon is spent foraging and fishing, taking advantage of the calm weather to replenish your stores. You visit the tide pools at the bay, finding them restocked with shellfish after the storm. You collect mussels and oysters, your hands steady as you pry them from the rocks, the shells cool and slick under your fingers. You also gather seaweed, selecting varieties you have learned are edible and nutritious. Back at camp, you process your haul, cleaning and preparing the shellfish for cooking and preservation. You experiment with a new smoking technique, using a mix of green and dry wood to create a balance of smoke and heat. The smell fills the air, rich and complex, and you feel a satisfaction in the refinement of your methods. As evening approaches, you climb your observation dune and watch the sun set over a calm sea. The water is smooth, reflecting the sky's colors in a way that feels almost intimate. You sit with your arms resting on your knees, the sand cool now as the day fades, and let your thoughts drift. The rhythm of your life here has become a source of comfort, a structure that holds you steady even as the world around you changes. Your evening meal is a celebration of your growing skills. Fresh oysters, smoked fish, roasted tubers, and a handful of ripe fruit from the trees you found. You eat slowly, savoring the flavors and the comfort of your shelter. The firelight dances on the walls, casting patterns that feel like a language you are beginning to understand. After dinner, you work on finishing the flute you started yesterday. You refine the shape, carving small adjustments to improve the sound. When you play it, the notes are clearer, more resonant, filling the shelter with a soft melody that seems to belong to this place. You play for a while, the music blending with the sound of the waves, and feel a sense of peace that goes beyond mere survival. Before sleep, you step outside to look at the stars. The sky is clear, the stars bright and numerous, their light reflecting on the wet sand below. You stand for a moment, breathing in the cool air, feeling the world around you as a living, breathing entity. You are no longer a stranger here, but a part of this place, connected to its rhythms and its life. You add the 20th mark to your calendar, the line joining its predecessors in a steady row. The marks are a record of a life that has become full and meaningful, a testament to your ability to adapt and thrive. You return to your shelter, settle into your bed, and let the fire's glow and the waves' rhythm carry you into a deep, restful sleep. The 21st morning dawns with a soft pink light that bathes the beach in a gentle glow. You wake to the sound of waves, quieter now than they were during the storm, their rhythm steady and familiar. You rise and step outside, the sand cool under your feet, the air fresh with the scent of sea and forest. Your shelter stands solid and welcoming, a home you have built with your own hands. Your morning tasks are a blend of maintenance and improvement. You check the fishing trap, finding it has caught a single large fish, its scales shimmering in the early light. You clean it carefully, the knife moving with precision through the flesh, and set it aside for smoking. You tend the garden, weeding and watering with care, the plants thriving in the rich soil you have cultivated. You spend the late morning working on the storage shelter, adding walls and a roof to protect your growing collection of supplies. The work is slow but satisfying, each piece of driftwood and palm frond fitting into place with a logic that feels natural now. The structure is small but functional, designed to keep your resources organized and safe from the elements. The afternoon is spent on a final exploration of the northern bay, where you investigate the rocky shore for new resources. You find a deposit of flint-like stones that could be used to create sharper tools, their surfaces smooth and cool under your fingers. You collect a handful, testing their weight and hardness, and carry them back to camp with plans to experiment with tool-making. You also gather more fruit from the trees near the bay, their branches heavy with ripe offerings. The fruit is sweet and juicy, the flavor bursting on your tongue as you eat one on the way back to camp. You fill your basket, the weight pulling at your arms, but the promise of fresh food makes the effort worthwhile. As evening approaches, you climb your observation dune for the daily ritual of watching the sea. The water is calm tonight, reflecting the sky's deepening colors in a way that feels almost serene. You sit with your knees drawn up, the sand soft and cool beneath you, and let your thoughts drift. The loneliness that once weighed so heavily is now a quiet companion, present but not oppressive. Your evening meal is a culmination of your efforts: smoked fish, fresh fruit, steamed shellfish, and roasted tubers. You eat at your table, the firelight warm on your face, the shelter filled with the comforting sense of food and smoke. The meal is not just nourishment but a celebration of the life you have built, a life that feels full and meaningful. After dinner, you work on crafting a new tool from the flint you found, chipping away at the stone with careful strikes to create a sharp edge. The work is delicate, requiring patience and precision, but the result is a blade sharper than anything you have used before. You test it on a piece of wood, the cut clean and smooth, and feel a quiet pride in the skill you have developed. Before sleep, you step outside to look at the stars. The sky is clear, the stars bright and numerous, their light a reminder of the vastness of the world beyond this beach. You stand for a moment, breathing in the cool air, feeling the sand shift under your feet. The world feels alive and connected, and you are a part of it, rooted in this place you have made your own. You add the 21st mark to your calendar, the charcoal scratching softly in the quiet night. The row of lines is long now, a record of 3 weeks spent building a life from the wreckage of the old one. You return to your shelter, settle into your bed, and let the fire's glow and the waves' rhythm carry you into sleep. The 22nd morning dawns with a gentle warmth, the air soft and fragrant with the scent of blooming plants in the forest. You wake to the sound of birds calling, their voices bright and varied, a sign that the ecosystem around you is thriving. You rise and step outside, the sand warm under your feet, the shelter casting a familiar shadow across your camp. Your morning begins with checking your systems, now so well established they require only minimal maintenance. The fishing trap has caught 2 fish, their scales catching the light as you lift them from the water. The garden is flourishing, the plants tall and healthy, promising a harvest in the near future. The smokehouse is full of preserved food, the air inside rich with the scent of smoked fish and seaweed. You spend the late morning working on a new project, creating a small boat from driftwood and canvas. The idea has been in your mind for days, a way to expand your ability to fish and explore beyond the immediate shore. You select the strongest pieces of wood, shaping them with your flint knife and lashing them together with rope. The work is complex, requiring careful planning to ensure the structure will be watertight and stable. The afternoon is spent testing the boat's frame, setting it in shallow water to see how it floats. The wood creaks softly as it settles into the waves, but it holds together, buoyant and promising. You adjust the lashings, tightening where needed, and feel a surge of excitement at the possibility of venturing farther out to sea. You also spend time gathering more resources, collecting seaweed and shellfish from the tide pools and fruit from the trees. The work is familiar now, your hands moving with confidence, your eyes scanning the landscape for opportunities. Each item you collect adds to your stores, building a security that feels both practical and deeply satisfying. As evening approaches, you climb your observation dune and watch the sun set over a calm sea. The water reflects the sky's colors in a way that feels timeless, a reminder of the rhythms that govern this place. You sit with your arms resting on your knees, the sand warm beneath you, and let your thoughts drift. The life you have built here is complete in a way you could not have imagined 3 weeks ago. Your evening meal is a feast of your own making: fresh fish grilled over the fire, steamed shellfish, ripe fruit, and roasted tubers. You eat slowly, savoring the flavors and the comfort of your shelter. The firelight dances on the walls, casting shadows that feel like old friends. The meal is a celebration of your resilience, your ingenuity, your ability to create abundance from scarcity. After dinner, you work on finishing the boat, adding canvas to the frame to create a watertight hull. The work is slow and careful, requiring precise stitching and sealing with resin. You test each seam, running your fingers along the fabric to check for leaks, and feel a quiet confidence in the quality of your craftsmanship. Before sleep, you step outside to look at the stars. The sky is clear, the stars bright and numerous, their light reflecting on the calm sea below. You stand for a moment, breathing in the cool air, feeling the sand shift under your feet. The world feels vast but welcoming, a place where you have found your place. You add the 20-second mark to your calendar, the charcoal leaving a clean line in the sand. The marks are a record of a life transformed, a testament to your ability to adapt and thrive in the face of uncertainty. You return to your shelter, settle into your bed, and let the fire's glow and the waves' rhythm carry you into sleep. The 23rd morning dawns with a soft golden light, the air warm and fragrant with the scent of the sea and blooming plants. You wake to the sound of waves, their rhythm steady and familiar, a constant presence in your life here. You rise and step outside, the sand soft under your feet, the shelter standing solid and welcoming in the morning light. Your morning tasks are now a seamless part of your day, performed with the ease of long practice. You check the fishing trap, finding it has caught 3 fish, their scales shimmering in the sunlight. You clean them with steady hands, the knife moving smoothly through the flesh, and set them aside for smoking. You tend the garden, watering and weeding with care, the plants thriving in the rich soil you have nurtured. You spend the late morning working on the boat, adding final touches to ensure it is ready for its first real test. You carry it to the water's edge, the frame light but sturdy in your hands, and set it in the shallow waves. It floats well, rocking gently with the movement of the sea, and you feel a surge of pride at the accomplishment. The afternoon is spent fishing from the boat, venturing just beyond the surf to cast your net. The water is clear and calm, allowing you to see fish moving beneath the surface. You work the net with care, pulling it in with slow, steady motions, and manage to catch several fish larger than any you have caught from shore. The success feels like a milestone, an expansion of your ability to live in this place. You return to camp with your catch, processing the fish for smoking and drying. The work is familiar but takes on new meaning with the larger fish, their meat rich and substantial. You arrange them on the drying rack and in the smokehouse, the air filling with the scent of fish and smoke, a smell that has become synonymous with security and abundance. As evening approaches, you climb your observation dune and watch the sun set over the sea. The water is calm, reflecting the sky's colors in a way that feels almost sacred. You sit with your knees drawn up, the sand warm beneath you, and let your thoughts drift. The life you have built here is not just sustainable but fulfilling, a testament to your ability to adapt and create. Your evening meal is a celebration of your achievements. Fresh fish from the boat, smoked fish from the smokehouse, steamed shellfish, and ripe fruit. You eat at your table, the firelight casting a warm glow, the shelter filled with the comforting sense of food and smoke. The meal is a reminder of how far you have come, from a desperate survivor to a confident inhabitant of this place. After dinner, you work on a final project, creating a small journal from pieces of bark and charcoal. You write slowly, recording not just the practical details of your days but the emotions and reflections that have accompanied your journey. The act of writing feels like a way to preserve your experience, to make sense of the transformation you have undergone. Before sleep, you step outside to look at the stars. The sky is clear, the stars bright and numerous, their light reflecting on the calm sea below. You stand for a moment, breathing in the cool air, feeling the sand shift under your feet. The world feels alive and connected, and you are a part of it, rooted in this place you have made your home. You add the 23rd mark to your calendar, the charcoal scratching softly in the quiet night. The marks are a record of a life fully lived, a testament to your resilience and ingenuity. You return to your shelter, settle into your bed, and let the fire's glow and the waves' rhythm carry you into a deep, restful sleep. The fire flickers low now, its coals glowing softly in the hearth. The air inside your shelter is warm, scented with the faint smokiness of the fire and the earthy tang of the palm fronds above. Your breathing slows, matching the distant rhythm of the waves, their sound a gentle whisper that speaks of continuity and presence. The ache in your back, once sharp and insistent, has dulled to a faint reminder of the work you have done. You pull the woven grass blanket closer, its texture rough but comforting against your skin. The world outside fades, the sounds of the night blending into a soft hum that carries you deeper into rest. Sleep comes quietly, wrapping you in its embrace as the waves continue their endless dance, and you drift into the stillness of the night.